Judge Craig Pasquale visit the Bridgewater Senior Center. That's March 19th at the Senior Center, 12:30 p.m. Complimentary pizza for lunch will be served at 12 p.m. And please call 697-0929 to sign up on or before March 14th. So time's ticking on that one for the pizza and the announcement, the event. Further announcements. A charter update information forum will be held right here on Monday, March 18th at 7 p.m. The interactive session will give the public the opportunity to ask questions about the proposed changes. It will be broadcast on BTV as well. So if you can make it in person, but would like to have a question asked during the session, email Councillor Bill Wood at wwood@bridgewaterma.org. And that closes announcements from the President. Moving on to proclamations. Having none. Citizens Open Forum. If there are any citizens who'd like to stand up, say your piece, name and address, and then we'll be glad to listen.
At Neary, 225 Lakeside Drive, Bridgewater. Good evening. We haven't been together for a while, so I guess it's about time. I see that there's a discussion scheduled on the agenda for tonight on the amendment of the table of uses. The CEDC and Planning Board have made great progress, and we, the Bridgewater Cares, are pleased with their work towards revised zoning with special permits. We would like to share some ways that other areas have made their special permits work for them. You may be aware of them, but this is probably just a reminder. Required distance between marijuana facilities will control the numbers of marijuana products that come through our town. Boston has a half mile between their facilities. They have dense development. We could require 1 mile in our rural community. We would also like to have you require the number of special permits be limited. We already have the 2 facilities on Elm Street, which equate to 4 uses, 2 each for cultivation and manufacturing, not even counting the medical portion of their business. Therefore, we suggest limiting the additional special permits in town to 2 testing permits. Those can be any of the special permit zones. We have one more suggestion. The zoning tables are not revised very often. You might consider adding a line now that indicates recreational marijuana sales are a no in every zone. If someone looks at our zoning table, that should be evident, and it hasn't been discussed prior. One more thing, I know since we're talking about grass pot, Grasslands has a lot of people here to support the parklands that will be discussed later. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sam Baumgarten, 60 Short Street. In recent weeks, I've attended 2 meetings related to the town's master plan, one on roadways and transportation and one on natural resources and open space. In both cases, I attended with some skepticism because it seems that we have been planning for many years, and we're still planning, and developing interesting summaries and creating some nice booklets and brochures as outcomes. And a lot of dedicated folks are putting a lot of time into those plans and outcomes and so on. But yet we don't seem to be implementing many of the suggestions, whether it's due to inertia, lack of will, lack of funding, maybe other reasons I'm not aware of. And I just received a notice to attend a meeting on bike transportation from the Old Colony Planning Council, which I also attended several years ago. And again, without much progress or implementation after the report is developed. On your agenda tonight is a proposal and discussion regarding the hiring of a parkland steward. The hiring of such a person at a relatively small cost compared to the budget would break the cycle of inaction that I just described. All the plans regarding our parklands, the 6 town-owned properties, which I hope you are aware of, I think most of you are, were developed nearly a decade ago and were approved by the Conservation and what was then town meeting, and were placed under the purview of our Parks and Recreation Department. As you know, we have only one person, Charlie Simons, who does a wonderful job, but he pretty much deals with sports and does not have the time and help to deal with the parklands. So we need a person who can oversee the parklands, who can ensure the upkeep, who can manage the volunteers. There's usually sufficient volunteers to work on those parklands. So I would like to see some of the hard work done many years ago in those plans come to fruition. And this is especially important given the loss of open space, because we continue to see houses going up on big properties, like on Cherry Street near my house, and soon to be on Curve Street. So it's even more imperative that we maintain the upkeep on these spaces so people have places to go for passive recreation. So I hope that when your final budget's approved, that you will make a little space for that parkland steward. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Taylor Sullivan, 250 Norland Park. So just wanted to first speak on the Elm Street overlay. At the last, the public hearing for the CEDC and Planning Board, thought we had some great talks about how to do that. My hope, and I think a lot of the hope of the people that live in that area, is to limit Elm Street to 2 cultivators, 2 product manufacturers, which is essentially would allow ACS in theory to continue to operate. And then in the other zones, you don't have them up because it's later, but in the allowable zones that they recommended, I think, Peter, you would know, I forget what they were exactly, but my wish would be to limit the number of special permits to 2 and specify the activity in each zone to testing. So you can pick whether product manufacturing, cultivation, or testing when you allow a special permit. So if we just limited any yeses or the special permit zones to testing, that would basically, I think, do what the original intent that we talked about, that you guys talked about a few months back when Frank, there's one other counselor, just mentioned allowing testing, to get new businesses and things like that. I think that would accomplish the original intent before that vote, that things got a little confusing. So that would be my hope. And then just to give you an idea, like other towns, I know it doesn't seem like a lot because we already have the 2 medical, but giving out 2 licenses for cultivators, 2 licenses for product manufacturers for recreational marijuana. For a town of this size, if you look at what other towns are doing that don't have bans, it is kind of a lot. So my hope again would be to limit the number of special permits in each zone to 2 and specify testing. Just an example, Brockton, they're giving out 8 total licenses, so they're allowing retail sales, but some of those licenses will be to cultivators, obviously, and product manufacturers, and their population is much larger than ours. Mansfield, similar town in many ways, also with the commuter rail. They have 1 specified location for cultivation, 1 zone, and they're only giving out 1 license. So those are just some examples. And then, not related to marijuana, just as part of the parks and recreation piece, I definitely agree they should have some type of paid position. I've lived in Bridgewater for a very long time. I have 2 small children, 2 toddlers, and I'm not really, I go to one park that's on the other side of the east side of town, but most of the time I take my kids to Easton to go to their various parks. So just, I'm in a PR background. I think you guys should focus on increasing the awareness, because I think if you increased awareness, people would be willing to donate and more things like that. Definitely about PR, because Easton, if you see what they've done in the last few years, especially with that Governor Ames Park off of Main Street, they've increased awareness. And if you look at donations and the trust, that's just a side note suggestion. I don't think a lot of people even know that there are parks. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, my name's Eileen Heine, and I live at 316 South Street. And I am here to talk about the Bridgewater Parkland Program part-time chief steward position also. I want to echo what Sam Baumgarten just said about having the same sensation really of being at two planning meetings concerning open space for the town. One was the climate change, looking at open space as a way to address climate change impacts in the town. And the second one was the citizens' input on the open space natural resources core assessment meeting for the Bridgewater Comprehensive Plan update. And I had the same thought of just, we keep making these plans, but we don't implement them. I was on the Natural Resources Trust Board over 10 or 15 years ago when these plans for our open space plans were put together for the Bridgewater Parklands. And they were good plans. There was a lot of work that went into them, and they have sat on the shelf in 10 or more years. And because the town just hasn't had the resources to put into that program, and it's really a terrible waste of what's really valuable open space and a valuable amenity for this town. And I really hope we can come up with a little bit of funding to really move that forward. So many volunteers put so much time into this, both on the NRTB board and then people who have actually worked with the parks themselves. And many are frustrated because they didn't have any support from the town through funding or staffing. And so it seems it's really time to give a little more importance and recognition to the value of open space amenities in town and to fund the position. So I hope you'll look favorably upon that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Steve Black, 145 Leggy Street. Been in Bridgewater since '85. Been involved with the Parklands pretty much since then. And I've been a steward at one of the parks for over 20 years. And I can't tell you what a wonderful town this is. The dedicated people that we have really, as volunteers, have made these parks what they are. But we've really operated on fits and starts. We've got great relationships that we developed with area vendors between Home Depot, Lowe's. The university is a tremendous partner. Scout organizations, our own highway department have all been instrumental in making them what they are, but they could be so much more. And I don't want to go into all the safety issues at these parks, but there are safety issues, and we need help. And it's just volunteers we can only just do so much. And like it's been said before me, it's been very frustrating. We've lost a lot of good volunteers who have been frustrated with the lack of support from the town. I look at this appointment as a part-time position for the chief steward as absolutely essential. Everybody can benefit from this. I mean, having open space and parklands, it increases the property value. Everybody's for that. I know of a number of people that do enjoy going to these parks, but we need help again with just getting the word out that these exist. I really think this is a key pivotal moment to open space in this town. And finally, it looks like the town is going to put something behind their words and support us with some financial help. And I hope you'll do that with this chief steward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Carlton Hunt, 80 Austin Street. I had the privilege of going with the Open Space Rec project manager to all 6 or 7 of our parklands. I had not been to many of them until I walked with him. They're phenomenal. There are viewscapes down in Titicut. There's a viewscape in the park that's off of High Street, Stiles and Hart. I've actually done some photography work down and documentation on the Stanley Ironworks Park. And the safety issue there, I almost went into the river as I was walking up a series of steps. I stepped down, the river had eroded underneath slightly, and I almost went through the sticks that were holding the ground up. So these are critical issues that these folks are bringing up. So I'm absolutely happy and pleased that we are able to have people discuss this incredible need in the town. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Anybody in the back? She-
I'll go quickly. Marilyn Kenny Hunt, 80 Austin Street. The main thing that I wanted to tell you is, speaking as your town clerk, that we have everyone's papers, everyone who turned in their papers to run in the election has had their signatures certified. So we will have 2 contested races, one for library trustee, 4 people are running for 3 positions, and for the at-large council seat, 2 people are running for that position. Everyone else is running solo, unless maybe a write-in. Very sadly, I will say, for this council, all of whom I respect, we do not have a woman running as a candidate. So I'm saying that mainly for the viewing audience and anybody here who are listening to. I like all of you. I appreciate all of you. I'd just like to see another X chromosome out here. And then I would also like to second what's being said about the parklands. As chair of the Community Preservation Committee for 10 years, we bought open space to have trails on. Those trails have not been developed, mainly because someone has to be able to work with Wildlands Trust or Fish and Game to be able to do that, and we have no one who can do that. Charlie Simons, who does our rec program, is great, but he spends his time on the programs that support the positions. So he doesn't have time to do these other programs that don't have any, there isn't a youth soccer league for open space or for walking or for dogs or something like that. So we have no financial support. So it's to you for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is David Moore, 54 Flag Street in Bridgewater. I echo the comments of everybody who has spoken before me about the need to fully utilize our parkland and open space. I've been involved with Ironworks Park at Stanley for many years, going back to before the town owned it. If this is what it takes to get it going, I strongly urge you to help us with some action to get this park going. Thank you.
Thank you.
Danielle Silva, 20 Tommy Ann Terrace. Good evening, President Haley, members of the Town Council, Mr. Dutton, and Attorney Rollins. I'm here tonight as a parent of 2 children in the VR school system and as a teacher in another district. Class sizes are on the rise in our district once again. This is very disheartening. I know many of you may be saying to yourselves, when I was in school, we had 30 plus in our class, and I turned out fine. The difference is, today, there is a lot more accountability. We have high stakes testing and students who have difficulty regulating their feelings. Kindergarten, which means garden for children in German, is not kindergarten anymore. It's yesterday's first grade or even second grade. Kindergarten's academic standards are dramatically more rigorous than even a decade ago. A 2014 study from the University of Virginia compared kindergarten's teachers' expectations for their students in 1998 to today. The differences were striking. In 1998, 31% of teachers thought that kindergarten students should be able to read by the end of the year. By 2014, that figure is now 80%. More than a third more kindergarten teachers now think that kids should enter already knowing the alphabet and how to hold a pencil. Overall, the researchers have found huge decreases in the amount of self-directed, creative playtime, dress-up, art, sand, and water play, and increases in the amount of time students were involved in teacher-related, direct whole-class instruction. Additionally, research has found that teaching children social and emotional skills at school, as well as at home, makes a positive difference to their well-being. social and emotional skills help children settle in the classroom and get on with their learning. Because it emphasizes teaching children the skills for positive relationships, SEL is also a key way for schools in their efforts to reduce bullying and improve caring, respect, and responsibility at school. When children are taught specific strategies for recognizing and responding to emotions, thinking through challenging situations, and communicating effectively, they are less likely to act out frustrations at school and elsewhere. Both of these have a direct impact on student learning. Since we have not level funded the services in our district in years, it has resulted in no new staff to address class size or support the social emotional needs of our students. The faculty and staff have been doing more with less. They make it work as best as they can because, after all, staff and faculty put students first. It is time to support our wonderful students, staff, and faculty and fund the budget. We owe it to this generation. After all, the previous generation took care of us, and now it's our turn to take care of the next generation. And would like to invite you, I know tomorrow night, the public hearing for the school budget is at 7 o'clock in the VR High School Lecture Hall. Thank you for listening each time. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Come right up.
Kitty Doherty, 524 Conant Street. Last year, in the springtime, my husband had gone to a yard sale on Route 18 in that direction, and he was in looking around at all of the different things that were there for sale. And the fellow that was running the sale came over to him, and they were chatting a bit, and he says, "Oh, I've got to ask Kitty if she likes these patio chairs." And he says, "Oh," the guy said, "Oh, you look familiar. How's Kitty? Is she still spending all of her time volunteering on that conservation stuff that nobody cares about?" And so that was not what to say to the man that said I was doing too much anyway. Anyway, we do have 6 parklands that have been identified and that are in the system in our open space plan, our master plan. We have management plans that were prepared years ago by the Conway School of Landscape Design. I can pass this one around. You can just look at it to know the scope of what is in the planning document. There are 6 individual ones. They're all unique for the site that they talk about. We also have design maps that were done. There's a sample of some of that work that's out on the back wall, just so you'll know that we've got an awesome amount of foundation documents and planning already for us that the town already has in place. When the Land Trust, the Natural Resource Trust of Bridgewater, was really working along with this, there were a lot of people that had volunteered. We had, like, those parkland plans themselves were done with each neighborhood where the parks were. So I would say that in the last 12 years or 15 years, there must have been 500 people at least that have volunteered, either for the nonprofit or for the parks through the town or through civic groups that have done projects like Eagle Scouts and others that have done different services on those parks. They're town-owned. It has to be that the town now assumes responsibility so that we can become sustainable with it. The monies that Charlie put into his budget proposal is just basic to get one person part-time for a portion of the year, but it would include somebody that would just pull together a collection of all of the plans that are. In fact, on the town website right now, you do have a report that's 2 years old from Anthony Hebert, and he did an analysis of the last 10 years and what the parks look like and what needs to be done. And I believe that Michael Dutton has also received a report within the last week from Galen Lawrence, who is Conservation Legacy Steward Fellowship through the Nature Conservancy, and she's been updating Anthony's report. So we have up-to-date ideas as to how to immediately start things that need to be done. And as far as this individual who would be the part-time chief steward, he would in turn mentor the stewards, the volunteers for each parkland, so that there's unity with what's going on there in accordance with these plans. And by the way, these plans indicate that that's part of the open space planning document. And as the open space planning document goes through its cycle of updates, these documents should be included with it to be updated as part of it. Other things that have come to be that it's just time to be able to get somebody as the face of Bridgewater's park system. We need that because there are new people in town. They call town hall. No one knows. They call the academy building. Nobody knows who's in charge, where the parks are. In fact, how many of you counselors have been to the parkland on your site? In your park, the park site in your, good boys, that's good. There's so many things.
We've been to the one in Mr. Wood's district.
There are so many different potentials that we can do with this. Right now, the community is in the process of branding downtown. The parklands should be part of how that's built. We want it safe. We want it to be comfortable for the people. Carver's Pond gets a lot of activity. There's another parkland right in the downtown that right now has 77 acres going up the hill to the water tower. It has a mile of riverfront. We seldom talk about our land and water trails. We have other amenities that could be fixed and repaired, not by this one individual, but that's the start. Now, when I was a little girl, I always wanted a pony. And Pa, can I have a pony? And he'd say, next summer. And so June would come. And I was all excited. School got out. Pa, it's summer. Can I have a pony? He said, I told you, next summer. So we don't want it to continue to be like that. We need a point person, and we need it now to be able to work all the stuff that we have in place together and then be able to build from it in harmony with Active Rec and the other betterments that we're doing for downtown and the whole town. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Going once, going twice, and we have a bit.
Bill Akins. My name is Bill Akins. I'm at 5 Oak Meadow Place. Just a curiosity. We're voting for the town charter soon, and there's $27,000 in that, and that would fund the parks. Just something to think about.
Thank you. And we will wrap up. Thank you for the comments, everyone. We have no appointments tonight, no hearings tonight, no license transactions, no presentations, other than if you want to take a look at that wall that's previously mentioned in the comments. And that moves us to the town manager's report.
Mr. President, I've got a few items this evening. One, just so that the council knows and the public knows, we have begun a process to reinvigorate our GIS presence. I think for quite a number of years, probably longer than a decade, we abandoned our GIS, which was unfortunate, but that is up and we're getting that up and running again. It's a very, for those that don't know, it's a very basic platform upon which we layer a whole lot of different bits of information, and it kind of serves as a background and a backbone for land use planning and stormwater management, sewer, water infrastructure, excuse me, and a lot of other things. So that is something that our community and economic development and IT departments are working on, and that actually helps us in park planning as well. So there's a tie in there. We did receive an administrative order from the EPA, filing of an NOI under the new stormwater regulations. I knew it was coming, so it was not unexpected, but we will be completing that filing before the end of the month. And the council can probably expect a transfer request for something in the order of up to $100,000 to complete the second phase of that stormwater planning process. Unfortunately, it's a mandate for us. We can't avoid it, and it's going to be hard if not impossible, to avoid the expense. So I just want to give you a little heads up on what's coming down the pike. We also will be doing some updates to our stormwater ordinance, and we currently have a general bylaw, a general ordinance rather, and that will need amending or replacement as we move forward. So that we are going to try to get done before June 1st. So we're on a little bit of a fast track for that. So just a little bit of a heads up on what's coming. Had a very productive call today with DeBartolo. DeBartolo is obviously the company that's building the 350,000 square foot high-end, if there is such a thing as a high-end warehouse on Elm Street. But I had a very good call with that company and their financial backers to go over construction schedules, how our municipal borrowing works, how the DIF works, the bonding and so forth. So their financing folks were doing their due diligence, which is actually a good thing. They have submitted their permit application, which I'm expecting to be issued this week, and they anticipate breaking ground on that project within the next 2 weeks. So that is moving along. Police chief asked me to relay information regarding the accreditation of the police department. The accreditation commission is scheduled to be in Bridgewater on June 4th through June 6th, and they will be conducting on-site reaccreditation assessments. And as you know, the department was originally accredited in 2016. It was quite an accomplishment for which certainly I am, and I think the council is quite proud. But that reassessment, well, there is a reassessment that goes on every 3 years after that. So just as a frame of reference, there are about 82 accredited municipal, state, university police agencies in Massachusetts. As part of the reassessment process, certainly the council and any members of the public are invited to offer any comments to the commission about the department, good and bad. And I'll give you the address, but if anybody's interested in the address, I'm happy to email it to them. But you can send written comments about the assessment to the Massachusetts Police Accreditation Commission, which is at 110 Haverhill Road, Suite 397 in Amesbury, Mass. 01913. So if anybody, as I say, if anybody would like that address emailed to them, just give me a call or shoot me an email and I'll send it out. We have a meeting in Boston tomorrow with the Massachusetts School Building Authority to go over and explain the district's choice of for the rebuilding of the Mitchell School. And I think, as you know, we explained last meeting, the Mitchell School Building Committee had selected the preferred option of a demo and rebuild on the existing school site. So this is really just the next step in a longer process. And I acknowledged it last time, and I'll do it again just so it tries to get out there. But I know there's a lot of confusion about this process, and that there are a lot of people that think that some final votes already occurred and the project is getting ready to start. That is not the case. What the Mitchell School Building Committee voted and the school board endorsed was to send the preferred solution to the Mass School Building Authority for its review, and then vote to endorse at their April board meeting. That still does not mean that it's a finished project. It then goes through another phase of more intense development and more robust schematic design that then gives sufficient detail to establish the building scope, the project budget, and the proposed timeline for that project. So that all has to happen. It goes back to the MSBA again for their Board of Directors consideration. And once endorsed or that concept is approved by the MSBA, then project funding agreement. for a town vote to do a debt exclusion to cover the costs. So that's, as I say, we're only halfway through a lengthy process. And certainly my thanks go out to the school building committee that's put a lot of long hours into considering the options for the Mitchells. So that is the process, and I will certainly keep you informed. I doubt that much will come out of tomorrow's meeting other than a presentation to the MSBA board, but then the next step would be their vote to endorse that option in April. So that's essentially the process at this point. Very quickly had a great opportunity to represent the town in front of the Boston Society of Civil Engineers. And I was asked to speak a little bit about green solutions for stormwater issues. And I think my role was to articulate essentially what cities and towns are looking for, what kind of solutions generally we're looking for, and certainly how engineers can improve their proposals to municipal clients. So I got a lot of great information myself, which hopefully we'll share, and some of the things that we tackle through our MVP program and drainage infrastructure work that we do ongoing. So that was useful and quite educational. Just to keep you updated on Spring Street, the Old Spring Street garage. As I probably have mentioned, we've done phase 1 assessment. We're just about done with a phase 2 assessment, and then we'll proceed to the final phase, which is any tank removal, tank drainage, and tank removal of things that are found to be in the ground. We know of one tank, and we know of liquid that's in that tank, and so we're going to deal with that. There may be others that are currently unknown, so that process is coming. I did want to mention, and I just not asking for a conversation at this point, because certainly we'll have a conversation later on. The engineers have told us that if the building does come down, it is probably unlikely that it could be replaced sort of with any other structure under our current zoning. So that doesn't mean that zoning can't change, but certainly I just want to keep folks aware of that. We have had interest from a number of different sources on the reuse of the existing building for mixed use, so commercial, residential, veterans housing, and as well as auto repair. So auto repair does not fit in with zoning as far as I know, but I throw that out there just so you're aware of it, and we can have a much more robust discussion of that afterwards. I mean, later on when the reports are all delivered. And the most important piece, and the final piece I have, you've heard it mentioned, I think the comprehensive planning process is proceeding. We are circulating save the date cards, which I think you have on your desks. They're little save the date reminders. There are 3 different sessions that are happening. The one coming up most quickly is March 23rd, which is a Saturday, from 9 to 12 at the senior center. Excuse me, the senior center. And I would ask, especially if you have not been involved with town affairs, this is a great opportunity to come and voice your thoughts about where you think the town should be over the next 10 years or so. And it really, for those that, and I've hear it and I heard it tonight, and it's certainly a fair criticism that the town does, and this is true of lots of cities and towns, does all this planning and we never actually execute. One of the things about this process is that we will not get a plan that is something that's impossible to execute. We'll get a plan and a way to accomplish what is outlined in the plan, in a roadmap, if you will, on how to execute that. So it also gives the council some guidance in your council direction. It also gives you some guidance on what you should ask of me as I try to guide town staff towards a goal. Anyway, the subject areas that will be discussed, and it's just so people that are afraid to speak in big groups, it's not going to be a big group that you have to get up and stand at a lectern and like here and speak. It's broken down into separate tables. We'll have some food to serve, coffee mostly probably, but certainly healthy foods and not so healthy foods to keep the 3-hour process going. But the areas, different tables set up, will deal with economic development, transportation, open space, land use, public parks, buildings, infrastructure, roads, and housing. So please feel free to come. It's open to everyone, and be able to voice. We want to be able to hear you voice your opinions about any one of those subjects. And if you only have one subject you want to talk about, that's fine. If you've got every one of those subjects you want to talk about, that's fine. But we just are looking for a lot of public input from residents. And as I say, my goal is especially to get comments from people that may not have participated in town affairs before, and really solicit some good comments. So again, first one, there are 3 of them. The first one is Saturday, March 23rd at 9 a.m. at the Senior Center. Please come and voice your opinions. And that is what I have.
Thank you, Mr. Dutton. Any questions from the councilors for the town manager after this report? Mr. Souza.
Just one more subject that didn't come up. Did we get a new van for the senior center? Has you're looking for a part-time driver? Has that been posted yet?
I believe that part-time driver has been posted. The good news is that we did get a new van thanks to the Brockton Area Transit Authority, who was able to secure a brand-new van for our purposes. If there is anybody out there that's interested in picking up a little bit of extra money and has the time, then absolutely we are looking for a driver. So just let us know. I believe it's posted, though.
Thank you.
Mr. Gallagher.
Thank you, Mr. President. 3 things tonight, Mr. Dutton, and I'll take them in order of less severity, I guess. Confidential secretary left a couple months ago. What is your plans for that position?
We currently have a temporary employee working that position, and we've interviewed, I think at this point, 4 or 5 potential candidates for the full-time position.
So you intend to hire somebody soon, or?
Yes.
Of the
absolutely.
Fund? Okay.
Yep.
That's one.
That's one. That's right. 2 more. The MBTA recently came out with their decision, the MBTA Financial Control Board, I think they call it, that they are going to be increasing fees, and I think that our town will be affected by the increase from Bridgewater to Boston on the MBTA commuter rail. What input did we have as a town at those hearings to offer our views on the increase? Not that it would have mattered, because many people voiced their opposition to those increases, but did you or the Transportation Committee go or take any position on that?
No, we did not, and I don't even know that we were aware of the specific hearing, to tell you the truth. But I can look to see. I don't believe we were directly notified of the hearings, but I certainly can check.
Well, yeah, and I think they did have a few throughout the state through the process, but I mean, it would have been nice if we, perhaps even as a council, took a position and just sent it in and said, I think that the taxpayers and residents of Bridgewater, I think, pay a lot of money to take the commuter rail into Boston for their job, and park and pay a premium to park as well. So I don't think it probably sits well with them that they're going to have to pay average 11, I think about 6% increase Some stations are going to be 11% increase on their trip to Boston. I think that we should have at least had an opportunity to, at least in writing or in presence, voice our concern about that, as many other communities did. The last thing I wanted to talk about, that was two.
Yep.
The last thing I want to talk about is just go back a little bit on the Spring Street garage. As I bring this up every meeting, what the status is on that, and I appreciate the update tonight. From what I'm hearing from you, I guess, is that there are underground tanks that are there, whether there's 1, 2, or whatever, and that it's possible that you've been hit with inquiries relative to potentially developing that at some point, if it's even feasible. Well, I mean, I think that one of the initial purposes of bringing that to head was to tear it down and perhaps make some parking area out of it. And it kind of goes along with the discussion we're going to have tonight on looking for a part-time steward to work on our parklands. Is that site right there leads to the Town River Landing, which is very, very important. And I know that I have been peppering you every meeting about the Spring Street garage, and I know that I'm the one that brought it forward for discussion and look into the feasibility of tearing it down. I just would have liked to have been at least informed as a counselor. Not that none of my other counselors didn't need to hear it, but it would have been nice if we had some communications between you and I about that. Because I'm going to continue to follow that, and eventually, I'll probably put something forward to decide what do we want to do with that piece of land. Maybe we do want to sell it. I don't know what my colleagues think. My purpose was to tear it down because it's an eyesore. I think that the businesses that are down there now are really doing very, very well, and they could use a little parking. And it would help if we ever do develop the Town River Landing. It could provide some parking for people that want to walk down there or take a trail walk with or canoe launch or whatever their recreational desire is. That's it.
Other questions? Mr. Wood?
Sure, thanks. I know, but I think others need to know. Mr. Dutton, where are we with the budget process, and what's our schedule?
We are on schedule with our internal work. We've developed a budget now and we're still working on what I will call a relatively small deficit. So we're trying to cut that back. And we'll be right on track to submit a budget to the council before April 1st.
Thank you.
Could I follow up on that?
You may, Mr. Fitzgibbons.
Did you start with, when you're doing the budget process, I don't know if this is for Mr. Dutton or for Mr. Wood, did you start with how much money do we expect to take in? Or did you start with how much money do we want to spend, and let's try to find out where we can find the money to pay for what we want to spend?
I'll be happy to answer that one. We never use the term "find the money" because that is not what we do here. So we start with a fairly robust process to try to identify exactly what our revenues are going to be, and this is true statewide. Or should be true with every municipality statewide. We start with a fairly robust process of trying to pinpoint exactly what our revenues are going to be. We've invested a lot of time and effort to improve that process, and then we.
That's Mr. Salmonti's revenue model?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Correct.
Keep going. I didn't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to make sure I was following you.
No, that's correct. That's the finance director's revenue projections, and then we look at all our spending. We identify what's necessary. Obviously we know what our current spending is. We identify what future spending is going to be necessary. There are cases where we have budgeted money in the past that we may not budget in the future. Certainly, I think the council is very well aware of some of the needs we have. And then we try to allocate those resources as fairly as possible amongst those needs after we prioritize those needs.
Thank you.
Mr. George?
Thank you, Mr. President. So, Mr. Dutton, we had Representative D'Amelia here a while ago, and the subject came up of prison mitigation, which I also brought up last council meeting. I know he's filed a bill. What I would like to see, and this is me personally, hopefully the council will support it as well, if we send a communication not only to Representative D'Amelia, but Senator Pacheco, expecting a lively discussion and support for Bridgewater to get its fair share of prison mitigation in the next budget. I'm really not going to be happy if I see Walpole get another $500,000 more than we do, and yet our facility here is twice the size. So I think we have to stay on top of them to get that particular funding not only established, but also make sure that we're all watching him, both of them, because if we don't get that funding, I'm going to ask him to come back and explain to all of us why there's such a discrepancy. So I'd appreciate that if we can get that communication out. Just to reiterate, I'm not sitting here saying they're not working hard, but this is getting old and tiresome. Thank you.
That's actually a point very well taken, and we can, if it pleases the council, we can draft some communication that will go to both our state senator and state rep exactly to that effect.
I would appreciate that.
Could, if it's in order, could I just make a motion to have the town manager draft that letter, and if it's agreeable to the president, that he sign it and send it on our behalf? I don't know if anyone's going to be against that, but I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
The motion made and seconded. Anybody for discussion on that?
What do we want to say?
Yeah, Mr.
What is it going to say?
What's it going to say?
Just
Well, I mean,
I think Mr. George was pretty clear.
I think what we can say is we're conveying to them that, we're supporting them. We always, the funny part is every year we hear, well, we can't count on prison mitigation because it may not get funded. So I guess it's a two-part letter. One is we're supporting them to get prison mitigation into the budget. But the second part is also to dive a little bit deeper into the funding numbers. The formula, thank you very much. The formula, so that if we get the same payment, someone needs to explain to us what the formula is.
WTF.
Thank you.
That's good.
I don't know if you're going to put that in there, but that's okay.
We're open discussion on that motion, Mr. Wood.
It always makes me nervous when we do something ad hoc that's not on the agenda in something that we could formalize as a resolution or order. So I'd like to ask you, through you to the attorney, if we wouldn't be better off doing that through some sort of actual measure that appeared on the agenda.
I would say absolutely yes.
Then I'd make a motion to have this appear on the next agenda.
I would second that motion.
Motion made and seconded by Mr. George. Discussion on that motion. Mr. Columbotus.
Are we withdrawing the last motion?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I think it would make sense for someone to come with a draft of a letter so we can see it beforehand and discuss it intelligently. So I don't know who that would be. Perhaps Mr. George would like to draft it.
I'd take that as a friendly amendment. And I'd ask the town manager to do it because that's his job. Mr. George doesn't get paid to write letters for the town, last I checked.
Nor do you want me to write letters for the town.
No, I don't.
Thank you, Counselor.
So the action part of that motion would be to have the town manager draft such letter for our review. And those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for the council for that input.
Can I ask a question?
You may.
Thank you. Mr. Dutton, I was wondering if you could let us know if there's been any progress on the resiting the central fire station, where that whole process is.
Oh, resiting.
Resiting.
I thought you meant resiting.
Moving it to another site. Yeah.
We've had some a lot of preliminary discussions with the fire chief, but we have not developed a committee, a citizen committee just yet. But that's the next step for us.
Thank you.
Other questions for the town manager? Mr. Fitzgibbons?
Just to follow up on a couple things. I guess I'll hit school building first because that's my favorite. I'm on that committee. It's a big game of Mother May I with the state, correct?
Correct.
And so there was a friend of mine who told me that he heard his taxes were going up $500 a month over the weekend when I ran into him somewhere. And I assured him that was not the case, that he would have a chance to vote on the proposal sometime in the fall. Is that still the timeline?
That is correct. That's still the timeline.
Okay, so that's good for him to know. Secondly, on the comprehensive master plan, you used an interesting phrase when you were talking about it, that it will, quote, it won't be impossible to execute. Well, you know what? When I was little, my grandmother told me nothing was impossible, but I tried to eat radio waves once and it didn't work. So I guess some things are impossible. What does not impossible to execute mean in your mind? Is that going to, and more importantly, does that mean it's going to involve asking Bridgewater residents to pay more in taxes than they do today?
I think you hit the nail on the head. It's something that we want to come out with a plan that has benchmarks and goals that are achievable within a reasonable cost or within our budget. So we're not, obviously there will be things that are impossible to accomplish without, a substantial amount of money. And I'm only using this as an example, but, a new Mitchell school, that might be a goal, or something like that could be a goal in the updated master plan, but the funding mechanism is obviously a
well, and you laid out a whole bunch of things at one of our last couple of meetings about our capital plan and where we expected to fund money, et cetera, and there were places where we had asks for funding, and we just want to be cognizant of that. And then my other question is more from a policy perspective around the comprehensive master plan. Is that a document that when it comes out binds the council, or does the council have to approve it?
Actually, ironically, the council does not have an approval process for that. That is approved by the planning board. But it also, when approved, is not in any way binding in terms of, being requiring us to expend certain funds. So
I didn't mean expending certain funds. I meant policy-wise. If the town council has a different policy than the comprehensive master plan comes out with, and how does that conflict play out? Does the town council just ignore it?
I think ultimately the town council is the one that sets the policy. So if there's a recommendation, and that's what it is, it's a recommendation in the master plan.
And
but
it's a
ultimately,
recommendation from the planning board
Correct.
to the town council that do this, but the town council could say, no, we want to build, skyscrapers as big as New York downtown, and if we have zoning votes and everything like that, it's in no way binding necessarily.
Correct.
All right, that was my only question. Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, moving on to discussions. Discussion for the Parkland Program part-time chief steward position. Councilor Gallagher.
Thank you, Mr. President. If you could just bear with me for a minute. And I put this on here for discussion based on the email that we all received from Mr. Baumgarten recently about doing something like this. But if I could go back to January of 2006 for about 30 seconds, I got on a bus with a bunch of people from Bridgewater, and Kitty Doherty and the university was very helpful in providing a bus for people to go around to look at the parklands in the town of Bridgewater. And I got on the bus in January 2006 to go around. And we got to the fourth one, and I still, at that point, I didn't even know the names of any of these parklands. And we got to the fourth one, and I said, well, how many are there left? We went to 6. I did not know in 2006, and I've lived, at that time, I lived here for about 12 years. I did not know that these existed to the extent that they did. And it was really eye-opening for me, which is partly why sometimes I'll try to make these recommendations as to, let's look into the mobile station and see if we can't do something with that, other than a building. Let's look into the highway barn to see if we can do something with that, other than building another building. You know, and try to develop that Town River Landing area as a destination, perhaps for people to come to Bridgewater. So I'm happy to bring up for discussion, because we've all got the email and heard from the citizens tonight about the potential of looking into funding a part-time chief steward to help us look into that study that was done and develops and start putting some meat to the bones of that study. I know we have a small shortfall in the budget, but I'm hoping we can squeeze a little bit of money out of there to fund this position for fiscal '20. So I bring this, before I put an order forward, if that's appropriate for next meeting, I just want to know from my colleagues what they would think about
Finance Committee, come back and tell us what we're not going to do in order to do this, and, you know, then I'll be able to make a decision. Thank you.
Mr. Wood?
So let me, I can't address that right away, but let me.
No, I don't expect it.
Let me talk a little bit about open space. So I walked, I was asked earlier about walking the Stiles and Hart property in my district. I walked it for a couple different reasons. One reason was I was trying to evaluate the size of 72 acres relative to the Calthrop purchase that we were thinking of, or Childway, or whatever we ended up calling it, to get a feel. And I got to tell you, my experience was dreadful. Mosquitoes everywhere. I know you can't take care of that in the woods, but to get into that location, it's very difficult. And you either go through the path that has the gate that's never cut, that has bricks all over the place. Hey, Stiles and Hart, it was a brick place, right? Bricks all over the place in that entrance. Or you cross through the barrier on 18 and you walk down the dirt path into where the two ponds are. I've also walked, and I'm going to mess up the name, Tuckerwood, which I believe is 32 acres, which sits on the other side of the street from me and has a winding river through. And at night you can hear the coyotes chasing prey and teaching their pups how to hunt. It's kind of interesting. But the thing that I find common to a lot of these areas, especially the 72 acres in my lot, in my area, is access is really difficult. And I've been, Kitty knows and some other people know that I've been working in the background on a little project that may open that up for us and may make it easier for people to park and not have to walk up from Rockland Trust or McDonald's up 18 to get to the park, and not have to walk in through the gate, over the bricks, through the trees to get to the park. And I get a sense for the parks that this is a common problem. So overall, I support the idea of having a parks to it. The second piece of this, though, is our town organization. So I've been serving on the rules and procedures for many years now, and one of the things that we did accomplish in the past several years is the town administrative code. And the town administrative code shifted our recreation department into a park and recs department. And it's probably not fully funded. It probably has a lot of needs when we talk about a needs-based budget that aren't being met overall, never mind for the park stewards. There were park stewards listed at one point because I called up. I wanted to know how many people were camping out in the SNH Stiles and Hart area, and it wasn't that many, although there was an occasional Boy Scout troop that I think went in there. Maybe that's why Mr. Fitzgibbons was in there. But my point is that, among other things, I love the grassroots effort to this, but I think as a council, as a town, as an organization, we need to look at, have we structured our government properly to handle a problem like this, to raise a problem up sufficiently, so that we can, through the budget process, identify the need within the department to satisfy the want of the town and to get the right personnel in place to handle items like this. To answer Mr. Fitzgibbons' question about budget more directly, I don't know. I don't know what it costs to hire a part-time park steward. I don't know if we need multiple of them. And I don't know if we could do it as a stipend or some other mechanism, maybe even active creatively, CPC money might be thrown into the mix. I don't know if that's even possible. But I don't know right now. I like the idea, but until it's a solid number and everything on the budget, I won't know if we can do it or not. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. Mr. George.
Thank you, Mr. President. So, a couple things. I fully support this. We have talked about, as a town, leveraging resources, leveraging the things that we have in town to attract new business. I don't think there's anything out there that wouldn't be looked at as a positive if we took advantage of all of the parkland that we have within Bridgewater. I don't think there's anyone that would doubt that. We're talking about the need, going through a process. I'll just say this, Mr. Wood, this is from June 2002. I think we don't have to identify the need. I think it's time to act. I think looking at this, and I went online a little bit to look at park rangers and park stewards, you're probably looking at about a $20,000 spend, give or take a few dollars here and there. I think we can find that in the budget, and I also think we shouldn't wait any longer to do it than we should if we can do it today. Because now we're going to have people coming back saying, we sit here and we talk and we talk and we talk, and we don't execute. This has been here since 2002. So my questions, and they don't have to be answered tonight, is just the scope of the job. I'm assuming that it would report to the director of recreation, which is fine. The hiring, all of that, the hiring process is just for clarification. I would fully hope and support that we have that within the budget and try to get that position filled as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. George. Other discussions?
Thank you, Mr. President. I certainly appreciate the fact that Councilor Gallagher has brought this discussion forward, and to hear the positive input that I have from a number of you here tonight. I am certainly also very much in favor of bringing forward this proposal to plan for a steward, a part-time steward, to help us to bring the parklands into a more viable recreational atmosphere. I can appreciate the budgetary concerns, and obviously we're in the midst of a budget preparation season right now. I find it, though, difficult to believe that we could not find the funding for a part-time position. I defer to those of you who are closer to the budget process, who have worked in that area on behalf of the town and its citizens for, in some cases, a number of years. But frankly, I think that it would have to be proven to me that we cannot afford to fund a part-time position for what I believe to be an important recreational need in this town. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Loesch?
Hi. Mr. Gallagher, who else did you speak to about this from on the town side prior to bringing it up for discussion? Did you get to talk to the the Recreation Parks Director? Did you talk to Michael Dutton? Did you talk to Anthony about this? Like, where did you gather your information for this discussion?
I had a discussion with, I read the email that we all got from Sam Baumgarten. I had a very lengthy discussion with Kitty Doherty about putting this forward.
Did you talk to anyone, like a department head, about this? Okay.
Mr. Fitzgibbons.
I'd just like to address Mr. Chase's comment about we certainly can find the money. I just heard the town manager say, as of this moment, the budget that he wants to have has a deficit. We don't have the money, and that's okay. We can make things work. We can prioritize. We can set things one above the other. And this is something that I think is relatively high priority on the nice to haves. And so when you, the Budget and Finance Committee, work with the town manager to figure out back a long time ago. I can't remember which job it was at, but they told me the first thing you have to do is do everything you have to do to comply with the law. You got to fund that. And then you have to do everything you have to do to make the business run. And then after that, you can spend money on other things. And so, you know, that's a relatively small amount of money as far as the town goes. As far, you know, it's not millions of dollars. I don't think it's hundreds of thousands of dollars. I think it's tens of thousands of dollars. And that's okay. You know, between the law and making things run, the nice to haves are very small for the town as far as I understand it. And so when we prioritize, when we say this is more important than that, then, you know, I think the Budget and Finance Committee has heard this council say that this one rises up really high on their priority list. And so I just add to Mr. Gallagher, because he asked about putting forward an order to do this. I think it would be much better served to go through the whole budget process and come in as part of the overall budget order than have a separate order, because then that just starts to get into various councilors writing different orders to fund anything that 5 of us agree to without you guys in the Finance Committee vetting it with the town manager, and now we're willy-nilly cutting things here and there.
True. Did you have a response to Mr. Fitzgibbons first?
Yeah, I mean, for everybody, actually, but, I mean, the position would fall under the Parks and Recreation Commission, so I guess we would ask that just get put in there, right? I mean, instead of having a resolution or an order separate,
Right.
just have that put in there.
Yeah.
Mr. Wood?
Thanks. Maybe I was a naysayer before, or made it sound. I'm fully in support of this, but it's a balancing act. It truly is. The first preliminary budget I saw was $200,000 in the hole, and I'm sure if we asked the Parks and Rec Department, which I'm sure the town manager is going to do in the morning, you know, about their priorities, they may substitute something else in here that, even though it's been a report since 2002. That they want to have better maintenance down at Legion Field, or they want to enable another program, or they want to do something else. I don't know what their mainstay is for this. The balancing act is that, as you heard Mr. Fitzgibbons say, first thing in the budget process is we figure out how much money is there, and then we figure out how to allocate it. And I have no problem with making this a priority, but if the budget is at net zero, and we're minus 20, then we need to balance it off with something else as a priority. So that's the budget process that we're going to go over for the next. Actually, I should point out also, when that actual budget is submitted, we only have 45 days to vote on it, according to the charter. So until that time, it's the town manager's budget. If we want to make adjustments, it's the committee and the full council to make the adjustments, and we need to get that done in 45 days. So it's a balancing act of where the resources are allocated and how they're allocated. I will throw out one suggestion, since I'm on the board of the Friends of TJ Robotics, and I'm also on the board of the Bridgewater Lions Club. Maybe someone out there might want to be creative with a Friends of Bridgewater Parklands and do a 501c3 to partially do this if the town can't do it right away. Thanks.
Mr. George?
Through you to the town manager, to kind of follow up on with Mr. Wood, from a procedural perspective, if we approve a park steward, are we allowed to also define the job responsibilities and the expectations, or does that fall specifically under the Parks and Rec Department?
I think the process that would work the best would be to, for me to take in what's been said tonight, and I think there's, you know, fairly universal positive reaction to trying to do something on a part-time basis with the parks. Let me take that, let me go back to the finance director and add that to the discussions about the formulation of the budget that I give you. As part of that process, internally, we have to create a job description for that and classify that. So we will do that, and then bring that back up as part of, hopefully part of my recommended budget.
Okay, so going on, and I just want this for clarification, because I think Mr. Wood brings up a good point, and I want to make sure that we're not doing all this work for naught. So conceivably, or if we find the funding, the director of the Parks and Recreation isn't going to be able to take that spot and put them in charge of Legion Field, correct?
I think, if I can weigh in a little bit, I think you have to be very careful because the charter is very particular in terms of the council not having any ability to in any way participate in the appointment or the removal of someone. So
Okay.
you can appropriate funds for the payment of someone, but I think that's pretty much where it stops. And
So-
then I think the appointment falls on the town manager who instructs the department heads, who creates whatever criteria they create for that employee. And I think the charter is pretty clear on that part of it.
Which I totally understand. We are not managing any way, shape, or form. But before we allocate the funding, we can set the parameters on the expectation of the position.
I think you're appropriating funding to the budget, and I think the way that our administrative code is set up is kind of like a tree, right? There are department heads at one level of this tree, and below them are the people. If this is the creation of a new department in the administrative code and this is going to be their own department head, that's a little different story. But if this is an employee of a department head within a department under the administrative code, I think that the department head, the way our charter reads and the way the administrative code reads, has the ability to allocate funds and instruct on what they need to instruct that particular employee in their department to do. I think without that structure, you cause a lot of problems.
Okay, so to go back then, we would probably look at the town manager to set that expectation of what we've conveyed at a meeting, hence the financing. Okay.
Exactly.
Bill brings up a great point in regards to, I just want to give someone $20,000 and have them hire a body and then go out and do things park and recreation-ish, but not specifically to what we intended it for. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Columbotus.
I think it seems like the administrative code provides the framework for just such an employee, right? So it's already there. We don't need to create a position.
Right.
And maybe we can't do that. And so probably our role here is to really ask for performance from the town manager. We say we want better management of the town park resources. And we might leave it there and you know.
Yeah, I think to
let him,
yes,
administer that. He's the administrator. He's in charge of
he
implementation.
appoints and hires
Right.
the department heads.
Right.
Correct.
So we set a priority. We make a policy declaration. The people want better managed parklands.
Right.
And whether it's through a contract through the Parks Department or a part-time employee, and we rely on the town manager to then delegate to his department head, and then the department head figures it out.
That
And
is correct.
That's how the chain.
That's how it's
should
supposed to work under
Right.
the charter and the admin.
Right.
code.
And we also approve the funding.
Correct.
Right.
You're in charge of the appropriation to that department. If you woefully underfund a department and then expect a new employee to go into the department, I mean, you can figure that out, right? That equation isn't rocket science. So that procedure that you're talking about is what's contemplated in the charter.
Right. So perhaps what might be in order would be an order from the council saying, given that there's a vast network of volunteers who've worked hard to improve our parks, given that parks can spur quality of life, blah, 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 therefore ordered that the town manager create a system to better manage our existing parks or whatever, some such thing. And that gives clear
I suppose
direction.
you could do a resolution or something like
Right.
that, right, where you're essentially laying out kind of some of the goals of the council, right? And,
Right.
and the things that the council's looking at. And
in any review or any evaluation of the head of the town, right? So,
Right.
yeah, absolutely.
Right, okay, thank you.
Or maybe a goal of the town manager as a priority that the council speaks to, which then to satisfy the goal in the evaluation, he would need to take executive action of funding and running a position.
So,
I should have.
It's, all I was going to say, I'm totally on board for having this. I think we brought this up a couple of weeks ago when we were looking at line items and we talked about rec and we didn't talk a lot about parks. But for me, this is like going to the finance director and saying that I want someone who only looks at certain things and I'm going to write an order telling the finance director what I think should be happening in finances, and I have no business telling him to do so because I don't have enough information or expertise. So I want to ensure that when this does get created and the conversation is happening, that we have people who know how it should be done and not us Googling things.
thank you.
I think the critical thing is to ask for performance and not a specific
Right.
how you're doing it, but
Right.
better managed parks.
Okay.
One, Mr.
To wrap it up,
Gallagher.
I mean, I think
Well, I'll wrap it up.
it's
You can
fair
go
to
ahead and
say
add
that you will put this as a line item under the Park and Recreation Department, right?
Well, that's my intent. I mean, we'll figure out, I don't know, can't tell you the mechanics of exactly how it happens, but knowing what the sense of the council is, without having legislation generated, but knowing what the sense of the council is, I'll go back and see how we create that position, what that position is, and then how we fund it, and come back to the council with that through the budget process.
Thank you for using the word mechanics. I was going to open with that, with my final comment about it. Mr. Gallagher, did you have one more thing?
I'm just hoping to see it when we see the budget. I'm hoping to see it in there. That's
So,
all. I don't care about anybody else. I want to
the
see it in
mechanics
there.
just that one thing. So, whatever the mechanics are, I think we're all clearly in agreement. Me being a townie, and me, prior to sitting in this seat, having moved back to Bridgewater after a brief moment away, wanted to come here and enjoy what we had for space available. Sitting with Kitty in her back room and going over the maps and the studies and if you notice, I was the only counselor that passed that 2002 study because I know that quite well. I've gone in the past, prior in my youth, I did go four-wheeling on through the guardrail over there back in the day. So I'm very familiar with a lot of the property, and I think, certain towns were mentioned. Easton was mentioned earlier in comments.
I don't think there were vehicles allowed where you went.
That's why I said earlier in my youth. I know. Officer Gray chased me down there. Terrible past. So I am totally for all of that. And conversely, being in the Budget and Finance Committee, I see where the other side, the financial side, is coming from. Otherwise, I'd be completely hoorah about doing everything as humanly possible because I want to use this land. My 6-year-old son and I want to use the land. It's really hard to get to any of the good spots, especially if you're 6 years old. And I'd say it's potentially dangerous for him to be at my side through a lot of those areas, especially the landing behind the Cable 8/Cable 9 studios. So I fully support whatever mechanics we need to do to push forward to try and get some funding to get the parks finally moving in a direction they should and not just in a book since 2002. Any other comments? Excellent. Great discussion. Thank you, everybody. Committee reports. Anyone? Mr. Wood.
So actually, I handed my notes to the council clerk, but that's okay. The Budget Finance Committee met to talk about 2 items, including master plan funding and what was the other one? Compensation funding and a couple other items. Good discussion, and we can get into more details when those appear on the agenda. I will say that I heard that the Finance Committee could not meet again this week. They could not make quorum. And that's a stressful issue that affects a lot of the items that appear on the agenda. So I'm not sure what their schedule is. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. Any other committee reports? Seeing none, moving on to legislation for action.
Motion to approve the 2019 town election warrant?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion? No. Mr. Wood?
Encourage people to vote.
You're going to
I'm
ask
sorry?
your question?
I'd encourage people
You're
to
going to ask
vote.
your question again? Every time.
So,
Is this
so I usually ask a humorous question, right?
Every time.
Every time. And why do I do that? But, so I'm going to ask a serious question, if I could, through you, Mr. President, to the town attorney. I was thinking about Ron Adams the other day, a great guy involved in everything from the golf course, building the golf course, to charity activities like Operation Santa. And almost 10 years ago, he stood up at town meeting and said that the town clerk had check and balance power. So the question which applies to this and other things like this is this, Mr. Rollins. Does the clerk have checks and balance in relation to the charter-defined responsibility of the council, manager, or any other town departments?
The notion of check and balance is pretty broad, but what are you talking in relation to? Are you talking in relation to whether or not they put the ballot forward and hold an
Put the ballot
election?
forward or took some other action?
As it relates to that action, they absolutely have no check or balance. No. They have the administrative duty and statutory duty and duty under the charter to ensure that the election is properly posted and held.
And isn't that true of all functions in the office?
I couldn't answer the question because it's not related to this, and frankly, I don't know if I could contemplate every possible action in the office. But I know as it relates to the one that's on the agenda, there's no check or balance.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? No. Okay, so those in favor?
roll call?
Roll call.
Oh, sorry, roll call vote, thank you.
Mr. Souza?
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus?
Yes.
Mr. Wood?
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher?
Yes.
Mr. Haley?
Yes.
Mr. Chase?
Yes.
Mr. George?
Yes.
Mrs. Lowe? Yes. Mr. Fitzgibbons?
Yes.
9 in favor, none against. Would you please sign the second page?
Signing.
Thank you.
And it'll be coming up now. Not like I just signed mine.
You can fill in the date after, Ann, or shall I fill in the date as well?
I'll let her do it.
Okay.
Okay, fancy.
Just sign your name.
Sign my name, sorry. Mr. George is adamant that I
Do
don't.
what you're told.
So sassy.
As we sign that, we're going to move to ordinance, let's start some old business. Ordinance FY 19-003 zoning ordinance to amend table uses for cultivation of marijuana testing and recreational marijuana. And brought to us by
Me.
Mrs. Loesch.
Do you want me to?
Yeah, go ahead.
No, usually we do like the backstory before we get to that point.
Backstory, please, Mrs.
Backstory, yes, the history, the context. So this has been with us since November, after our previous votes. A reminder of how it came here and where it, and how it's been reinvented. We wanted for things to happen in town and relates to recreational cannabis. It needs to have a use table, or anything in the town needs to have a use table. We did not have one when it came to this, so we decided to create one as we move forward and create additional legislation for uses of said product. We want it to be substantively different, so we had yeses and nos in certain sections. It went to the planning board, it went to the CEDC to have many discussions, and this is what we come back with. So where you have previously seen yeses, we have decided that a special permit process made the most sense instead of being a complete no or a yes. There needs to be an additional process for us to go through that. And as we went through that process, as you'll see later on in the agenda, what does a special permit mean? That is there. But we couldn't combine the two because one was ahead of us and it is not it was something that had to be a separate permitting process as opposed to having it be embedded in this. And this is something that we spoke to Ms. Burke about. So it went through great discussion. I think we've all come to the conclusion that this was the best compromise for the town. So I move to approve.
Second.
Motion made and seconded for approval.
I see a note here, not for action.
Advertising?
Or it's further action. What?
Needs to be advertised, I guess.
Are you voting on the proposed amendments?
Yes.
First and foremost?
Yeah, sorry. To be clear, the amendments changing yes.
So the motion was made to the amendment as written in the ordinance.
So I think what that probably is referring to, and the town manager can correct me if I'm wrong, but it appears that you're making this more restrictive than it initially was. There were more yeses prior to that. So when we do that in an amendment, we send it back to the planning board for hearing because we're making it more restrictive.
Okay.
Okay.
That's fine. That's actually more helpful.
So then this motion is being reworded to say that we're going to send...
I think you have to amend it first.
Okay.
And then I think you would vote to send it to the planning board.
So first we're voting, the motion is to amend,
Right.
as
Yes.
stated. So
And there's a second.
that being
by Mr.
clarified,
And I would second.
Yes.
made and seconded.
No question.
Discussion on that with Mr. George.
So we've got a letter here from the planning board, excuse me. So does the amendments mirror what the planning board
No.
recommend? Okay.
So great question. They could not, even though we had group discussions as a planning board and a committee, they had to make a recommendation based on what they saw and not what was going to be amended because it wasn't amended by this body yet.
Okay.
So they're deciding not to recommend is all the yeses and all the nos.
Right.
When,
Okay.
as counselor, well, you're still counsel, mentioned, it would be, they'd be looking at hearing with the SPs now because it's been amended. Hopefully we'll pass
Okay.
amendments.
So without speaking for them, these amendments seem pretty close to what they had put in here for notes in regards to why they had opposed it.
I think they're the same. I think they're agreeing, as Mrs. Loesch said, they couldn't opine on our amendments.
Right.
But their comments do, I think they do mirror exactly our amendments. Is that right?
They mirror our amendments because we
Right.
were missing certain zones.
Yep.
Right.
So,
I guess that should have been the question I asked initially, so, okay, thank you.
Mr. Wood?
So we had a hearing, right? We spent money to have the hearing and then it came back again. So if these
Bring on
amendments are made,
this,
yeah, what
didn't have a hearing on this.
wasn't the planning board
It was a joint meeting,
joint meeting? So no hearing on this.
no hearing.
Okay. So, but it's a zoning ordinance.
There was actually, I mean,
So it was an advertised zoning,
Oh, in January, but most recently it
Right.
was just a meeting.
okay, all right. So my question really, again, is a legal question. So the council voted a zoning ordinance that did not restrict the zones. And then when a subsequent vote came to restrict the zones, that failed, which I thought put us in a 2-year moratorium to make any changes to the zoning restrictions.
The last one that was before the council that failed related to specifically to the Elm Street overlay district. So as long as you're not bringing forward the same thing veiled some other way, it's substantially different enough where you can bring forward something like this table of uses. Your last one was specific to number and specific to Elm Street. This is just amending the table of uses, and it's much more broad, frankly, than the one before. And even with the proposed amendment, remains much more broad than the last one. So I think it's substantially different, which
Okay.
would not require you to abstain for 2 years.
2 additional questions, if I could.
You may.
So I was at the town meeting like 30 years ago when we voted, maybe it was 40 years ago, when we voted in the East Gateway District. But today, even though I think it's in my district, I can't tell you where that is. So can someone describe to me where that exists?
I think we need a map.
And the Gateway for that matter, too.
Right.
Using two different computers.
Right at the top of noon.
I think it goes on Plymouth Street, down past Waterford Village.
EGBD. Is that it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Your house.
So we can have business in that district, we just can't have business that isn't favorable to business. Because that's the reason for the Gateway District. It wasn't an industrial district, but it was set up as a zone to allow businesses in that area. As best I can recall.
Was there a question in that, Mr. Wood?
Yeah, I needed to locate it first. And the other one is the Gateway Districts. Where's that? Is that in the same area?
The Gateway District is out on Pleasant Street.
Right after you come off 24, up 104.
So where National Grid is and
On up.
a little further down.
Yeah.
But it includes the corner of the ERO, or not, because ERO is higher. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Those were my questions.
Okay, so now we're back to accepting the amendment. There's another question. Mr. Columbotus.
I was in the minority on these changes. While I agreed that that the use should not be allowed in the central business district or the south business district, any of the business districts, I thought that it should remain a yes in the industrial A and B. It seems once, as clear as you might make a special permit guidance, the conditions, there still be it has, I think, having a use not as of right within a district gives investors pause, and so you're really not, you're much less likely to get a response from the private investors. And so I thought industrial A and B, these are uses that are really not going to have any detrimental effect, and they're well suited to industrial A and B. When this first came through the council, and I think there was a overwhelming majority that really thought that luring testing facilities in particular with the tremendous tax benefits they would offer the town was something we wanted to encourage. And it seems, I'm just concerned that with this rather restrictive use, we're really not going to get that use that we wanted. So this seems to run counter to the desire from this council to draw uses that would provide benefits without undue collateral damage. So I would urge that we do not reject these amendments. Well, maybe I can I amend the amendment?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
I'll second it when you're finished.
I would like to change the use in industrial A and B to a yes, so that is to remove the requirement for a special permit in those two districts.
And I second that.
Okay, additional motion made and seconded to change industrial A and industrial B to yes. Can we start discussion on that, Mr. Fitzgibbons?
So, Mr. Columbotus, if I'm to understand your motion correctly, if, Mr. Dutton, if you go up Main Street, yeah. IB right next to the central business district. Why wouldn't we include CBD, not the oil, in it, since it's right next door, it's across the street?
I think these sort of uses they're not uses that generate foot traffic. They're not kind of customer based as the kind of businesses we're trying to develop in the central business district. So I think, it would undermine the purpose of the central business district to allow these uses, which, like I said, don't generate foot traffic or otherwise kind of customer based downtown. So
does IB, should IB there be changed eventually? Is that your opinion?
Perhaps. I mean,
Okay.
we can only do so much at once, I guess, but Yeah, I just think these are uses that don't have many deleterious effects on neighbors and can have the potential to draw tremendous revenues to the town. So we're not really, I think it's unlikely we would get a private investor to come in and go through the permitting process when they're not sure there are plenty of other towns offering this use as of right. And so if we want to compete for this business, they should be yeses, then at least industrial A and B. Otherwise, we're just kind of, I think, fooling ourselves.
Mr. Wood.
So I think at this point, after, 15 years of this discussion, we've pretty much killed the possibility that we'll ever see this form of business in the town of Bridgewater and miss out on a ton of taxes in whatever form that you can think of. So industrial B on Broad Street, I think is where the Perkins Foundry is right now, right? So that might be a good site if that ever turns over into another industry to keep it IB. It's not gonna, it doesn't have a lot of foot traffic today. Even within the central business district, there's the green something processing plant over behind Burger King. Generally not generating a lot of foot traffic, doing some business. That might be a good site for other things. The industrial A and other areas like that are set up to be industrial areas. And it makes sense to me to not put up a barrier because we because we create a special permitting process that is defeated in another board or committee because we thought it was a good idea, but someone else didn't. So I'm completely in support of what Councilor Columbato said. I hope it passes. If it doesn't, at this point, I'm pretty much sure that we're never going to see anything beyond the 2 cultivation sites that we already have, which was what the 100 folks here wanted to see anyway. Thanks.
Mr. Columbotus, followed by Mr. Souza.
Through you, Mr. President, I have a question, Mr. Dutton. Do you have any idea how much in tax revenues a single testing facility would generate? Beyond just real estate taxes, they would also pay taxes on real property, like high-tech equipment and such, right?
Correct. If you had a testing facility, you'd be paying real estate tax for the underlying building and property. You likely would also be paying a personal property tax for the equipment and what's used in the business.
Do we have any idea of what?
I wouldn't hazard to give you a guess on that one.
6 figures.
Well, perhaps I could add to that question. How much do we generate from the existing the existing 1 cultivation facility per year?
That's a good question. Let me.
How many park stewards? 6 or 7?
At least 10 or 12. Let me see if I can get you an answer on that.
While you look that up, Mr. Souza, would you like to ask your question?
Not
Make your comment.
I'd like
Okay.
to comment on it.
Sure.
Okay. I guess you heard me say a couple of times that we've done a lot of things in town to be anti-business. I'm the guy who brought up this testing system facility. We had a lot of discussions. There was people against it. Even the group who was against bringing in the recreational marijuana or even the marijuana at all was against it. But now they're talking in favor of it because they realize it's just going to be a tax-generating business, which is not going to really bring in anything worse than what we already have. Okay, so I think, I agree with Peter and Bill. I think we have to not restrict everything. We have to have an area, and those areas there should say yes. Because one of the biggest things we do in this town is we send everybody to committees, and they go on, and they go on, and they go on, and they go on. And if you go out for a loan, your bank interest is only going to be good for 3 months. And sometimes our committees take 6 months or more. I read a report the other day that said that. 6 to 8 months in some of our committees. So these companies aren't going to waste their time if that's what's happening. So we have to have some areas with this. If the testing facility wants to come to town, here you go. Here's a spot. Okay? And I don't think they're going to argue whether they're downtown or if they're right next door to the facilities that's growing it. Okay? They want to go in and say, okay, they're telling us we can put it here. Let's look at it. We like the area. Let's put it there. And I think we have to do that.
Mr. Dutton, do you have a figure? And after that,
I can tell you that both of the current medical marijuana facilities have committed to a mitigation payment of $150,000 a year, and that's over and above the real estate tax that they pay, and also what they pay under the medical, their medical license.
So that's each of the two?
Each pay $150,000 a year.
And that's for non-medical?
That is for cultivation.
Non-medical cultivation. Okay, 300,000. Thank you.
Ms. Loesch.
To your point, Mr. Columbotus, about them not understanding or having it be a yes versus them wanting to come in, I think since we talked about having that special permit criteria be upfront and open and clear, which I think is what we've seen from what's come back from the Community Economic Director. So I don't think if anyone is coming, they're going to be confused. My second question is to Mr. Dutton. Since we don't actually have anything right now, how many testing facilities have called to move to Bridgewater and or its surrounding areas in the past 18 months?
I'm not aware of any testing facilities that have inquired as of yet. I do know that there are cultivation facilities that routinely call, but I think they routinely call many communities.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Chase.
Thanks, Mr. President. If I recall, and I'd certainly like to be enlightened if I'm wrong, but I believe that there are actually very few state-licensed testing facilities that have been approved to this point. We may be hopeful for a long time, frankly, before we might see one knocking at our door. But having said that, I think that given the criteria that we're proposing for adoption as to the special permit process, I think it's all extremely clear. And of all the possible uses, manufacture, cultivation, or testing, I think the testing would certainly involve the greatest investment in personal property, which is what we're talking about as a source of tax revenue, potentially. And I think that that type of facility and that type of investor, I think as Mr. Columbotus has characterized it, would be perfectly comfortable with a well-drafted and very unambiguous set of criteria to guide the planning board in its decision. I think that those guidelines would really remove a lot of ambiguity, and I think it would help to put the special permit process in really good stead in the hands of the planning board. And I think what I'm saying is, and I certainly can see both sides of this question, but I don't find an issue with industrial A and B being reserved for special permit applications in this regard.
Mr. President.
Mr. Fitzgibbons?
I guess this is to both Mrs. Loesch and to our town attorney. I guess start with the town attorney. If the planning board, after we send back whatever's amended to them, doesn't like it, can we act on it in defiance of them?
Absolutely.
Okay.
The only reason, they're there to give you a recommendation.
That's advice.
And their recommendation to you either starts that 2-year clock or it doesn't. So when they say no, as they did here, and clearly so as you can see, we worked very carefully to make sure the process worked right, then if you were to vote on this anyway and it failed, it begins the 2 years. If they say yes, you don't have the same kind of limitations.
And so, I don't have a question for you now.
Okay, great.
But I do have a follow-up. And so, whatever passes, whatever comes back to us from this process, however this is amended, needs to be at least 6-3 in order to have it be effective. in which case then it's a 2-year process.
So,
We need a 2/3 vote. of the
so if
town
you
council
amend,
on
if you
zoning.
amend this.
Right.
And then you send it back to a hearing in
Right.
front of the planning board, and the planning board at that point says no again, and it comes back and you vote it, the 2 years starts to run. If you send it back and they
what
say
if-
yes.
But if we send it back and they say no, which I'm assuming they were very clear in their reasons, and they say no,
Yep.
and then this council votes 5-4 to approve it, that's a fail,
Right,
right? And so that 2-year process then starts again.
absolutely.
And so whatever is amended, whatever goes to this next phase of the process,
Yes.
whenever it comes back to us, if we want to achieve anything, we need to have at least 6 people around this table saying thumbs up.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Ms. Loesch?
I thought Mr. Fitzgibbons was going to have a question for me, but after sitting with the planning board for the past 3 months, or right, 3 months on this, which looks like it's going to be 4 because we have to have another hearing. To your point about being very clear, since we made the amendments, it should come back favorably because we.
Unless we adopt Mr. Columbotus's amendment.
That's
Right,
unclear.
which I'm not feeling as strongly about. So let's go ahead for that vote.
Mr. George?
Thank you. And I appreciate what Mr. Columbotus is saying. I guess my perspective is this wouldn't be the only zoning that we have special permit for. I used Google, by the way, to find the zoning bylaws, which is pretty good.
I hope it's helpful information.
It is, considering that just looking at a lot of the different special permit areas, we have a whole host, and some of them are probably in businesses that we don't have in town, but there are a lot that are on here that we do. And I guess to Mr. Chase's point, I'm not concerned about the special permitting as long as it is clear, concise, and they also get guidance from the town on what the process is, because I think we've had instances where we've had businesses look at areas that are zoned yes, that have come in, and this is a general statement, and have been somewhat left on their own and have gone elsewhere. So I'm actually happy at the fact that there is going to be the possibility of having testing facilities in different areas. And yeah, bring them in as a special permit, but give them the guidance that they need. And I think any investor is going to be smart enough, to your earlier point, Mr. Columbotus, to not only look at the process, but feel confident in fact that they can get approved. So my recommendation would be keep as is, not as amended.
As
Not the amendment of the amendment.
Amendment 1, not the
amendment.
amendment.
Right.
Mr. Columbotus, to you.
Regardless of how clear you think you're making criteria for special permit, there's always some degree of subjectivity.
For sure.
Which really colors, an investor's take on something. I'm on the subcommittee for the comprehensive plan with Mark Bobrowski, who's basically written the book on, I know Mr. Rollins can attest to this, for statewide zoning, and he spoke pretty clearly that you're introducing that even a germ of doubt to an investor, they'll go somewhere else. They'll go to the next place, which doesn't require a special permit. I just don't see the potential harm of allowing these uses by right in an industrial zone. We allow a whole lot of other uses that are a whole lot more detrimental to the quality of life than this use, without nearly the benefit. So I just don't, we let all sorts of toxic, enterprises happen in industrial zones. That's the nature of the work. And so I think this use should be allowed by use.
Mr. Souza.
Chances of having one here, because there's only 2 facilities here, both Brockton and Middleborough have a number of companies who have applied for different permits. I guess Brockton already has approved a few stores that are going to be open selling recreational marijuana. Middleborough and Brockton are looking at stores plus possibly facilities. Okay, so we're in the center. You see how that might work out a little bit better for them? There's 2 here, there's some there, there's some here, and the testing facilities in the middle of them. That's my point. Let's not chase more places away.
For testing facilities, You know, there are some that you will get light foot traffic, by the way, if you want to have your own home grow tested. A lot of places will allow you to have it tested. Nice. It's kind of like getting acknowledgement for your home brew or beer, getting a little award from Sam Adams. I don't want to restrict any business for any reason other than obvious noise and all the great stuff there. However, I do know that there are a lot of special permit stipulations put on things that could be seen as volatile subject matter as this is. So though I would lean yes to the second motion, I think that I don't want this to perpetuate as seems to have been going, like other things we've discussed tonight. And maybe I just don't feel the keeping it as originally amended would be a detriment to anybody coming in, and they didn't instantly just scroll past Bridgewater. I think what they see for landscape is a lot of the towns have that type of stipulation on it rather than an open yes. So with that said, any other discussion?
One more
from Mr. Wood.
Is it possible, Mr. Dutton, to bring up the current zoning use of tables? Because I left my booklet at home, and I don't know in context what the rest of the use table looks like.
Sure, I can bring that up. Hold on,
Proud of you. You got great rudimentary computer skills. Keep it up.
It's a great game.
Keep it up.
Might take me a sec. Might take me longer than a sec. Hold on.
Boy, if we all had Chromebooks.
Can I just ask a follow-up? So, Mr. Wood, you're asking to see the rest of the tables in regards to marijuana usage, or?
No, the whole table in the zoning.
Doesn't there have to be like some relevance to like what we're doing?
It's section 6. We're changing it.
But that's what I'm asking. Like, what is?
Well, if you consider what other uses exist in the industrial zone, that
In the
would provide
industrial
some.
zone, that's what I'm just trying to understand. If he's just.
I'm not trying to delay anything. I usually have a link at home to get to the zoning ordinance.
Looking at industrial AB and E?
Well, the table has 10 rows in it.
Correct.
It's, I think, or whatever's in front of us.
6.3.
6.3, right. It's just a small matrix.
Like 4 page, 5
Just wanted to see how this comports with the rest of everything else that's in there.
That's not part of.
Right. What I'm saying is compare it to the stuff.
Yeah,
Bridgewater, looking for special permit stuff.
Municipal computer.
Is that one of the ones we got from the college?
Those broken down.
Yeah. Maybe you should ask your boss for a new one. You know, the funny thing is I emptied out my bag and I had the green book, which was like the last printed copy that the town ever printed in my possessions.
Yeah, it just exists in the ether now.
It may be faster to run home and grab it.
Well, I could send it to you on your phone.
My phone is giving me an error. I'm dangerously low on file space right now. Otherwise, I would have looked it up. That may be it.
Yep.
Yeah, table.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
I have it up. I don't know if that helps.
Take me 5 seconds here.
So Bill, is something I mean, I've got it right here, but I don't know if I can answer what you're looking for. Is there something specific you're looking at?
Erica. I'm sorry, Mr. George, go ahead with your question.
No, I'm just, I'm
Do you wanna-
asking.
Do you want to send Mr. Dutton that link?
Sure.
That might be,
Well, it's still an Adobe.
oh, maybe.
Yeah, it is,
You don't
it
have-
is an Adobe, so.
You don't have Chrome?
My battery's running low. We need power on these.
You're falling apart.
An HDMI on that thing, or whatever, you can plug it, yours into his, overhead?
Oh, yeah.
I do. Do you want to switch out?
You have HDMI?
He does.
I do.
You're willing. Actually, you don't even need to move.
You're going to read?
Here's the workers' copy you're looking for.
Thank you, Mr. Dutton.
First. Make sure you close your email.
I had
My email's not open.
concept that this would take so long. Sorry about that.
Yes, you did. Yeah.
Yeah.
You knew exactly what you would.
I second that, Mr. Gallagher.
Oh, you're looking at your watch.
Government runs at slow paces, right?
Oh, man.
No, I don't know if that's it.
Do you have a,
May I see? No, it's fine.
oh, hold on, you need an adapter.
Yeah, if you give me the adapter. I don't think, this is old.
Do you have the other side?
It's not there. It's not there. Yep.
He was, guy involved with it was recalled, but he was reelected.
It just changes, I think you've got like,
It says mayor facing federal charges was recalled and reelected on the same ballot.
Actually, I have a laptop for that matter.
That would be helpful also for our large audience to see.
Problem is, it's 5 people.
Oh,
Something's happening. That's gonna
It looks like Michael's computer.
throw in both sided.
Okay, could we just draw it, perhaps?
It's 10 blocks.
All right. Bill?
it would be I.
Mr. Wood, do you
I got it here, Bill.
want to lean over to the right? And we can stand behind each monitor if we really want to get the full 10 by label.
Do you have it?
I do.
Let's see.
All right, so for barbers, shops, beauty shops, shoe repairs, we have yeses in multiple areas. For dry cleaning, we have yes in multiple areas. For veterinary establishments, we have yeses in multiple areas. As dry cleaning, yes, dry cleaning uses chemicals, right?
Big chemical.
Yeah. Pete, I don't know how to scroll an apple.
Nothing has changed since you last left.
Yeah.
Where do you want to go?
Just automotive for equipment, we have yes in industrial A. Sale, rental, yes. Car washing establishment, chemicals again, yes. Laundry, dry cleaning plants, yes. What I wanted to see was prior establishment of zoning ordinances that have yes as a, I forgot what P called it, but
As of right.
as a right to establish their business. And so I think that hopefully people will see that maybe as a right for a business definition that we should support the industrial areas as has been outlined by the amendment.
Mrs. Loesch?
I just have, how many of those are controlled substances?
Well, I imagine the dry cleaner probably has some controls around it.
No, but I'm saying like they're ingested by
Gas and
people that,
fuel.
and impair their driving or.
That's not the question, though, before us.
The question is about changing something from A to B, and you just read off barbershops and dry cleaners, and you were saying that those are chemicals that are
Right, and I
bad.
can't jump ahead to the
I'm talking about
special
what's-
permits.
Nope, not
but
talking about that.
I know we're not talking about that.
Okay.
Table of use regulations up on the wall.
Use regulations, right?
Yeah.
So even if we had a special permit, it wouldn't address controlled substances.
I'm just trying to follow your logic so I can either be for or against what you're for, and I'm not following, so I'm looking for additional context.
The state has particular regulations for businesses, and what I would like to say is that for the surety of financing and other things, that they can execute business as the business is defined it as state regulated in our industrial areas by simply saying it's yes.
Okay.
As opposed to other additional town regulations that they might have to follow under the special permitting.
Got it.
Mr. Fitzgibbons, if you want to go to the podium and say it so we can get you on record.
So what I was interested in is, in having this pulled up, is are there other types of uses where there is absolutely no zone as of right? And line 2, you can have a one two-family or one duplex on a separate lot, only in residential C or D, nowhere else but special permit only. Multifamily dwellings, mixed use, only in central business district by special permit, nowhere else. Conversions to live-work units, residential B, central business district, and industrial B, but only by special permit. So it's not, we're not breaking new ground if we say that it's special permit or no in various districts.
Mr. Columbotus?
My main point is that we expressed an interest in drawing testing facilities and generating revenue from some of these businesses, and we're disallowing them in places where they wouldn't cause a problem, and that's my main point. And we don't allow those uses because we think having a lot of apartment buildings in town wouldn't serve the town's interest. We've made those decisions about what we want and don't. Earlier, the council expressed an interest in deriving revenue from these sorts of businesses, and now we're severely restricting the possibility that that will actually come to fruition. So I would recommend against that.
Mr. Chase?
I think, if I may just point out that even though we're speaking about what conceivably would be a desirable use from the town's perspective, that being testing, the ordinance as written would cover cultivation, manufacturing, and testing. So it's not giving us, well, let's put it this way. I think it's opening the door to more than we're actually hoping to see, which by applying the special permit criteria, I think that it would be left to the prerogative of the planning board, to make an informed decision based upon these guidelines and to be applied, to be applied just across the board to, whatever type of facility they wish to see in industrial A and B.
Right. So perhaps a clearer way. So there's still, so you're protecting against these less desirable marijuana uses.
Yes.
By including a special permit. But at the collateral damage is not providing surety to the desirable uses. So I guess our problem is one of specificity, right? Ideally, we would have had perhaps broken these uses up into testing, be one row, cultivation, manufacturing,
Perhaps
a second
ideally
row.
so. Right.
That probably would have made more sense, given this council's preference for testing over the other uses. I don't know if that's still doable, but.
Good points. Can I have an example, just because I'm fairly ignorant as to, what
does that count?
An example of an existing SP that a business has had to apply for, the process to go through, how restrictive or non-restrictive? I mean, how heavy or how light are these traditionally that we go through? Or is that too open of a question?
That's pretty
Is it?
broad. Yeah, I think it's contextually. I think it's where you're applying. I think it's based on the amount of infrastructure of the thing you're applying for, the amount of additional services it's going to require, the taste of the abutters, the taste of the planning board relative to the comprehensive plan, the overall goal of the underlying use table. I think they consider all of that, right? So, Mr. Chase makes a good point in that with the special permitting criteria, and in particular, this is very specific special permitting criteria. Planning board's pretty considerate of all those things. So there's no formulaic response that, yes, it's very easy to get one, or no, it isn't. I mean, it's really contextual, honestly.
Well,
I'll move the question at this point in time if someone wants to second me.
Second.
yeah. Yeah, well,
Should have done that 10 minutes ago.
the original amendment, we're in the second amendment.
Oh, I don't know. No, his amendment.
We've
We got to vote on
we
moving
gotta
the question.
Move the question?
That's what I heard.
Yeah. So
Okay.
are we we need 2/3 of the people to say, yes, we want to vote right now, or no, we want to keep talking? Non-debatable.
Okay, so you made a motion made and moved, so.
Just take a vote.
Just a
Roll call.
roll call vote.
Is it roll call? Does it
No.
have to be?
No.
No?
I thought it did. Okay.
All right, those in favor of moving to vote?
Aye.
Aye.
Those against? And that, again, that's for Mr. Columbotus' motion.
This is on the amendment to the amendment.
Okay, so now we will vote on the amendment to the amendment. Is it also a voice vote? Okay, those in favor of Mr. Columbotus' amendment?
Aye.
Aye.
Those against?
No.
No. Like 5 to 4.
Could we try a roll call?
Like a roll call.
Mr. Fitzgibbons?
Yes.
Mrs. Loesch?
No.
Mr. George?
No.
Mr. Chase?
No.
Mr. Haley?
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher?
No.
Mr. Wood?
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus?
Yes.
Mr. Souza?
Yes.
5 in favor, 4 against.
Mr. President, I'd like to make another amendment.
Mr. Columbotus, go ahead.
I should have included industrial zone E in that previous amendment, so I make an amendment to change the SP in industrial E to a yes.
I'll second that because I thought we actually included it, but if not, we'll vote that one too.
I think I just specified AB.
I think your initial amendment to an amendment was industrial A and industrial B only.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah.
So Mr. Columbotus is adding the third industrial.
Well, changing the SP to a
SP to-
yes in industrial E.
SP to Y.
Right.
Second for discussion.
Second for discussion, second by Mr. Gallagher, discussion.
Just a point of clarification with the town manager, Mr. President, if I could. We appropriated X amount of money about 2 to 3 months ago for a zoning consultant to come in and look at all this, right? Has the RFP gone out yet?
Oh, we're in that process.
So is it
right now.
possible that they're going to take a look at what we're doing and say, well, wait a minute, Bridgewater, you really don't want to do this, and make a recommendation to change things back? Or will they look at some of these zoning tables as part of their work?
I think they're looking at zoning tables right now
Okay.
as part of that work, but I also think that whatever you do now ultimately will be essentially reviewed by the Comprehensive Plan Committee, and as part of that process, the Comprehensive Plan Committee may come back and say, okay, here's what we prefer. We prefer not to have any industrial property on the east side of town. I'm making
Thank you.
this up. And then we'll come back to the council for that
Columbotus?
amendment.
So if this ordinance is passed, there's nothing prevent a further amendment fewer than 2 years, sooner than 2 years. That 2-year issue we have is only if an ordinance is rejected. It can't be
A zoning
reconsidered if it's rejected.
Zoning amendment.
So if it's, right. So it could be brought up
Only
again.
if the planning board does not recommend it.
That's right.
Correct.
And we don't adopt it.
Correct.
So further discussion on the adding the SP to the, changing the SP on industrial E to Y. So we should vote on that. Oh, sorry, Mr. Fitzgibbons.
I don't see, was this just added in, that we'd forgotten industrially in the
Yes.
first version? Okay, thank you.
You have to go right to roll call with that.
Thank you. Mr. Souza,
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus,
Yes.
Mr. Wood,
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher,
No.
Mr. Haley,
Yes.
Mr. Chase,
No.
Mr. George,
No.
Mrs. Loesch,
No.
Mr. Fitzgibbons.
Yes.
5 in favor, 4 against.
Okay, so now to the standing motion as amended. So this will be the main motion, if you will. Was it? We consider that the main motion?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So, any more discussion on the main motion?
I just want to say that if we maintain 5-4 on this, whatever comes back, we're done with marijuana for a long, long time. I would hope. I mean, and that might be some people's goals or not, but between now and whenever this comes back in its final form, I hope we can find a way to put it somewhere and comply with Massachusetts law. And whether it needs to be SP to get to 6, I am open for that. I think Mr. Columbotus made some valid points, and to bring in a testing facility would be a great thing to do. So give him a chance to say yes, but I want to get to 6 next time this comes by. So and I'll stay here all night to get to 6. So I'm just letting you know.
Mr. George.
So I appreciate what you're saying, Tim, but I don't see this as keeping it special permit, saying no to testing facilities. I think what we're trying to accomplish is what the planning board, as well as a lot of citizens have asked, is in regards to regulating it and controlling it. That's, I guess, from my perspective, this is what the planning board, the joint meeting came back with these recommendations, and we're going against them, and it's going to go back there again. I mean, it's going to be a tennis match. So that's probably where I am right now in regards to us getting recommendations, and then not to say that we don't have the ability to change those, but I think we all kind of have an idea of what we're ultimately trying to get to. I just don't think we all agree on how we're going to get there.
That's fair. I mean, I want to get to 6. Next time this comes to us, I want to get to 6.
It's been a very long day. Can I be reminded of what the motion is that we're about to vote on, please?
The original.
That's the original one.
The original amendment.
What is the original amendment?
printed.
that would
The
come up?
amended,
With the
the
Ys.
two-time amended
The twice
amendment.
amended, yes.
All right, so let's just go through it for the tables from left to right. Residential AB would remain no, residential C would remain no, residential D no. And then for the original amendments for tonight, the CBD, not the oil, is amended to a no, SPD amended to an SP, Business B amended to an SP, Gateway amended to an N, East Gateway amended to an N, amended tonight would be Industrial A amended to a Y, Industrial B amended to a Y, Industrial E amended to a Y. And from the original amendment for tonight, PD District SP, and that final one, whatever that is, MHEC District to N. That is what we will be voting on now. Any questions on that? Okay, so those in favor?
Aye.
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 Those against?
No.
You got that?
There's 3 no's.
There's
You know.
I'll make a motion for a roll call.
Second.
Motion made and seconded for roll call. Please have a roll call. Any discussion on a roll call?
No, I think someone can just ask the president.
Oh, I'll ask for a roll call.
Roll call, please. Thank you.
Mr. Fitzgibbons?
Yes.
Mrs. Loesch?
No.
Mr. George?
No.
Mr. Chase?
No.
Mr. Haley?
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher?
No.
Mr. Wood?
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus?
Yes.
Mr. Souza?
Yes.
5 in favor, 4 against.
So we're back to the ordinance without any of the strike-throughs, right?
Which will require it being sent back, based on it being more restrictive.
So I'll make a motion to refer to the Community and Economic Development Committee and the Planning Board.
Point of information, the e-gateway, that wasn't, that we approved that as an N, correct?
No, we amended the amendment to make it a yes.
No, e-gateway. is
E-gateway.
stated.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Gateway is an
Gateway
N.
we didn't, right?
I'm sorry.
Correct.
Right.
So
Right.
I'm just, forgive me, Ms. Columbotus, but not everything changed on here
Right.
again.
3 things changed.
Correct.
Industrial A, B, and E changed from SP to Y.
Okay.
But then the amendment,
Itself, the original amendment
Failed.
before us did change from the Y weeks ago.
there was a twice amended amendment, but that twice amended amendment failed, right?
No, it
No, it didn't.
passed.
Okay, passed 5-4.
The twice amended amendment passed, but the twice amended amendment is still more restrictive than the initial amendment, or the initial ordinance that was put before you guys. So you're going to have to vote now to send it to the planning board, which is necessary for them to have
Yes.
a hearing. I don't believe, you can vote to send them to both. They don't necessarily have to have a joint hearing, but I would vote to send them to both.
So I'd make that motion.
I'll second it if it hasn't.
I'm reminded of Dr. Seuss with that. So there's a motion been made and seconded. I don't know if anybody wants to reword that motion. But, okay. So now we vote on that motion because discussion's done. So those in favor of that motion?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
No.
Roll call.
This is sending it to the planning.
This is sending it to the planning board
And the community.
and the community CD and EC.
Mr. Souza?
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus?
Yes.
Mr. Wood?
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher?
Yes.
Mr. Haley?
Yes.
Mr. Chase?
No.
Mr. George?
No.
Mrs. Loesch?
No.
Mr. Fitzgibbons?
Yes.
6 in favor, 3 against.
Thank you, everyone. Now we can go to new business. Something completely different.
Yeah, completely. Completely and utterly different.
Ordinance FY 19-005, zoning ordinance to establish special permit criteria for cultivation, manufacturing, and testing of adult use marijuana. Brought to us by Ms. Councilor Loesch.
So, as we briefly talked about before, there are special permits on the use table. And when we had our meetings previously, we didn't want to just have special permits approved without understanding the criteria of what that meant. So prior to our last planning board and CEDC meeting, we went through, well, probably a couple meetings. We had Ms. Burke come back and provide us some drafts, and we went through and reviewed it with the planning board. And we were all, Mr. Chase and Mr. Columbotus remind me, they were all pretty aligned to what had come before us, but it was in draft mode and it was just for discussion. So this is the formalization of that. So with that background and context, I move to have this go to the planning board and the CEDC, possibly in that joint meeting, so we can only talk about it once.
Second. Second.
Motion made and seconded 3 times. Those in favor?
Aye.
Oh, sorry, my mistake. Thank you, sir. Mr. Wood, discussion.
I don't have, nice work. I like it.
Thank you, Ms. Burke.
The only issue that could be a sticking point is the odor control plan, because I think of chickens when the manure plan and how someone may change that and make it hard for an establishment. Just wanted to raise one item, not to change it, but when it goes to committee to talk about. So under the definition of marijuana, it says does not include oil, but then I think later on in here, it does include oil. And oil, I think, is probably like potentially like the CBD oil and things like that.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure that the committees take a look at that and make sure that that's clear. So there's not a conflict between the two.
Where do you see the second oil?
Trying to find it right now. I looked at it earlier.
It's the end of the second paragraph on the second page. Marijuana products.
Right.
8, line 7?
5 lines down.
Okay. Thank you.
Other discussion? Back to the voice vote. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those against? Thank you. To order FY 19-051, acceptance of a gift, Bridgewater Police Department. Mr. Town Manager, Mr. Michael Dutton.
Mr. President, this is very simple, but certainly we're very thankful. Chakrans has gifted us, pending approval from the council, has gifted us some police protection equipment, and so this would be first reading, and it'll come back obviously for second reading, and I would encourage the town council to accept it.
Motion to refer to the Budget and Finance Committees?
Second.
Motion made, second, in discussion? Seeing none, those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Citizens' comments? Anybody here like to come up and say anything? Seeing none, moving on to council comments. Mr. Fitzgibbons.
I'd just like to highlight something that's actually a really great partnership between the university, our town, and the school district, which is every year Bridgewater State University makes available 25 scholarships in the amount of $1,000 to any senior who's graduating high school, who's a Bridgewater resident or student at Bridgewater-Rainham Regional High School and is accepted to Bridgewater State University. So if anyone's thinking about that, please reach out to Sue McComb, who's the Director of University and Community Partnerships at Bridgewater State, and she can get you all the information. Again, another great example of university, school district, and town collaboration. Thank you.
Ms. Loesch?
I just want to wish everyone happy St. Patrick's Day, to be safe. And don't forget to go to church because it's about a saint. Secondly, on Monday, Mr. Wood has spearheaded alongside additional counselors and citizens and committee members to discuss the charter changes. So tonight we talked about what was going to be on the ballot, and the charter is on the ballot in April. So if you want to understand what got changed and why, this is a great forum to sit down and talk and ask questions in a somewhat formal but informal setting. So we hope that people can come out. It's at 7 on Monday here, and I will be there for some time, so see you then.
Mr. George?
I am good for tonight. Thank you.
Mr. Chase?
No comment, thank you.
Mr. Gallagher?
I hope that people come out tomorrow night to attend the budget meeting for the schools is tomorrow night. I will try to be there, not that I'll have a lot to add or anything. We're still working on the budget here, but I want to hear some of the concerns as we have already by some of the citizens. And obviously the meeting next Monday night in here. We'll talk about the charter amendments to the ballot. I'll be participating in that. I want to wish everybody a happy St. Patrick's Day on Sunday. I'll be doing a road race on Saturday in Marshfield. And I want to thank BTV for this pen. In full disclosure, I'll be taking it home tonight.
Great
Thank
pen.
you.
Me too. Do we have to report this?
Mr. Wood?
It's less than $50.
Less than $50.
You're fine. That's right. Thank you for talking about Monday night. I think it's really important. We did a session back in May of 2017, according to the slide deck, And we haven't really done any since then. There's a tremendous amount of work that was done by the Charter Review Committee, by the our own Rules and Procedures Committee, by this group. And I find that in many cases, people aren't even aware we left selectmen, town meeting, form of government. So I'm hoping that people are catching news that we're going to do this, see some information, and then just get a little bit more educated about what the charter is and what it contains and the suggested updates to it coming up in April. The other thing is I can't attend the budget meeting tomorrow night. I sent a note to some of the school board members. Have another obligation tomorrow night, but I think there's a follow-up on it a week later, and I should be able to attend that. And finally, TJ Robotics. For the second week in a row, unfortunately got runner-up, but did really well. Got the excellence in engineering. So if you want to see, and I tried to put this out on Facebook, awesome program, kind of groups a lot of information in a very short period. Ninth graders who haven't had physics classes are learning physics and mechanical engineering and art and a whole bunch of other things. With friends, we talk about collaboration. We hosted, we had a practice room set up in the large instructional classroom on several weekends. Easton came over and ran their robot as a practice because one of our mentors built like all field objects to spec. We hosted BP. We actually traded off with BP, so they don't have a strong software group, and we don't have a strong welding group. So they did some welding for us, and we did some software for them. And that's what the program's all about, is collaboration, and it works great. So I'm happy to be part of that group. I think there's enough district points to make it to WPI district championships, and if they do well there, the next stop is, it's now being called Half World Finals because it was so big they split the World Finals into two pieces. But good showing. A lot of people came out this weekend, so it was a great program. Thanks.
Mr. Columbotus?
I'd like to thank the citizens who came out tonight to speak in favor of, in support of establishment of a park system. I think parks and open space and passive recreation can be a tremendous asset to the town, not only in just quality of life for citizens and the improved health outcomes and allow people to interact with each other, but they really can be a strong driver for economic development. A lot of high-value firms that employ information workers, doctors, lawyers, programmers, they want to be located in a town that has these sorts of amenities because that's where their employees want to go. So there's a real strong correlation. It's not just a luxury that would be nice to have. It really is vital to fostering positive economic development. So I urge support for the park system. Thank you.
Mr. Souza?
I'd like to ask the entire council if you would help me to clarify something. I received this little note, and you probably all have, in our little box, and it says, "It has come to the attention of a few members of the school committee that there is a held belief, potentially by some members of the council, that kindergarten learning is based simply on playing piano and singing songs. If you believe that, please raise your hand. And will the man in the back room with the camera scan the entire council so everyone can see how many members of the council raised their hand? Thank you."
Oh, thank you, Mr. Souza. Oh, I guess it's my turn. For robotics, I just wanted to add that I didn't make it this past weekend, so it was last couple of years I have. Though I did want to mention that when you talk about the opportunities that are there for the kids to get together, I was approached by a gentleman that I worked with in medical device technologies, and his company, which is a top-tier medical company globally, he came there because his company supports it, and he wants to see what type of engineers he may be seeing down the road. Believe it or not. I don't know if I've mentioned that to you, so that was more for Mr. Wood. For parks, Mr. Columbotus is absolutely right. I mean, that book that we looked at from 2002, our world is so much different, and the people that are in the workforce today and that are using these open spaces, these passive recreation spaces, it's a much different world, and it is more important to today's version of American society than it was in 2002 because of that wonderful internet and all the things that have come about through it. So it would be really great to be a town where we can have great maps and great parklands to be able to use. So if we can get that mechanical thing moving to get some kind of stewardship and great things for parks, that'd be wonderful. With that, I am done with my comment.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Thank you.